The following content depicts found footage, audio recordings, and assembled files. The events, locations, and individuals depicted are fictional to ensure anonymity. Viewer discretion is advised. Share your experiences and reactions in the comments. They may be used in future studies of unexplained phenomena.
My name is Evelyn Duarte, and in 1973, I worked as a nurse during the restoration of St. Helena Hospital, an old psychiatric facility being converted into a general hospital. They said the East Wing had been closed since the 70s, that no one had stepped inside the old nursery for decades. But I did, and the night I heard that lullaby playing from a radio that wasn't plugged in, I realized some songs aren't meant to be remembered. I still hear it sometimes. That soft, broken voice, humming through the static, whispering the same line over and over. They never sleep without me. The hospital smelled of paint, rust, and something faintly chemical. My shoes echoed across the empty East Wing as we cleared the old maternity ward. It felt strange working in a place that had once been part of a psychiatric hospital. The halls too long, the ceilings too low. The laughter of the other nurses helped at first. We made jokes to cut through the heaviness, shoving broken beds into the hallway and dusting shelves that hadn't seen light in decades. I remember pausing by a door marked Nursery, the paint chipped, the handles stiff with age. When I opened it, the air inside was colder, thicker. Rows of small cribs lined the walls, covered in white sheets. I told myself it was just another room, but as I stepped away, I could have sworn something faintly rocked, ever so slightly. My first overnight shift felt endless. The generators hummed weakly, flickering the lights in a rhythm that made time blur. I wandered the East Wing during rounds, drawn to the nursery again. The key turned reluctantly in the lock. Inside, the air felt stale, sweet, like medicine and powdered milk. I walked past the cribs, brushing dust from their rails. A rocking chair stood near the window, its paint flaking, one leg shorter than the others. On the far shelf sat a radio, small, old, its cord coiled neatly beside it. No power, no reason for it to be there. I ran my hand over the dial. It didn't move. The silence in that room felt unnatural, as if sound itself was holding its breath. I left quickly, but a smell that faint sweetness clung to me the rest of the night. It began on my second night. I was sorting boxes near the nurse's station when I heard it, a melody so soft I thought I imagined it. A lullaby, faint, echoing down the corridor. I froze, listening. It was old-fashioned, slow, almost like a music box. The others were asleep in the break room. I followed the sound, each note leading me closer to the nursery. When I reached the door, the song grew louder, then stopped. Total silence. My hand hovered over the knob. I pushed it open. The room was dim, moonlight cutting across the floor. The radio on the shelf was glowing faintly, just enough to see the dial tremble, but it wasn't plugged in. I stood there, not breathing, as the last note faded into the dark. Then came the static, low, steady, almost like breathing. The next morning, I brought it up casually over coffee. I told them about the lullaby, about the static, about how it stopped when I entered the nursery. To my surprise, two nurses exchanged a look. Maria said she'd heard something similar near the maternity corridor, a faint tune that made her skin crawl. Claire admitted she'd seen one of the cradles move, hoosed a little, as if someone had brushed past it. We laughed it off, all of us pretending it was just nerves, old pipes, or echoes in the vents. Still, when the wind pushed through the hallways that afternoon, the sound it made was eerily close to a lullaby's rhythm. The song came back, the next night. Softer, like whoever was singing was closer now. I was stalking gauze when I heard it, just a few notes, but I knew the pattern. I walked toward the nursery, each step quieter than the last. The radio sat where I'd left it, unplugged. Its cord still looped neatly on the shelf. The tune faltered, then shifted into something like words. I leaned in, holding my breath. The voice, faint, female, hummed between phrases I couldn't quite make out. Then, just before it stopped, I swear I heard it whisper my name. I froze, staring at that lifeless radio, waiting for it to prove me wrong. It never did. I couldn't let it go. The next day, I asked to check the hospital archives under the excuse of updating patient transfers. The clerk barely looked up as I slipped into the dusty back room. The files were brittle, pages yellowed and curled. I found a report labeled Infant Ward Closure in 1948. My pulse quickened as I read the name. Nurse Margaret Hall. The summary was brief but chilling. Multiple infant deaths. Poisoning confirmed. Nurse declared unstable. Final statement. They never sleep without me. I flipped through the attached inventory list. There it was. Radio Model 47B. Evidence collected. My stomach dropped when I saw the final note. Item missing upon transfer, 1952. That night, I tried to ignore it. I told myself it was the wind, the plumbing, anything but what I knew it was. But at exactly midnight, the sound came again, faint, rising through the vents. That same lullaby, only this time there were words. A woman's voice, calm and deliberate. I pressed my ear to the nursery door. The phrase was clearer now. They never sleep without me. The air turned heavy, pressing against my chest. I stepped inside. The radio was glowing again, soft green light bleeding through the dust. When I reached for it, the melody stopped. I whispered to myself, trying to remember the line from the report. Margaret Hollis. Final words. The same words. I felt my pulse climb up my throat. From that night on, silence became unbearable. Even when the radio was dark. Primera EARD, low and steady. Like it had buried itself somewhere beneath my breathing. The song followed me now. Not just at work. At home, in the shower, in my sleep. I started leaving the television on just to drown it out. But it always found a way back. Through the pipes, the elevator shafts, the hum of fluorescent lights. One night, I returned to the nursery. The rocking chair was moving again, slow and rhythmic, matching the tune. All the cribs swayed gently, as though rocked by invisible hands. I called for Helen, another nurse, but the moment she stepped in, everything stopped. She looked at me like I was losing my mind. I wanted to agree with her. I wanted it to be madness. But then the radio flickered to life behind us, and through the static, I heard my own name. I don't know what possessed me to stay that last night. Maybe I needed to prove something. Maybe the song had already claimed me. I sat in the rocking chair, hands trembling, and waited. Midnight came, and with it, the lullaby, clearer than ever. I felt warmth against my shoulder, a breath that wasn't mine. The voice was beside my ear now, humming in harmony. In the glass window, I saw her, a nurse's uniform like mine, but older, yellowed with time. Her smile was soft, gentle. She was cradling something in her arms, swaying in rhythm with me. When I turned around, there was nothing. The chair kept rocking. The air was cold, but I could still hear her whispering right next to me. They never sleep without me. My name is Clara Mendez, and in 1998, I worked the night shift at San Gabriel Hospital's neonatal unit. I thought I was used to silence, the kind that hums beneath fluorescent lights, the kind that wraps around sleeping newborns. But that night, I realized silence can also listen back. I still remember the sound of the metal crib rattling behind me, though I was alone in the room. And when I turned, she was there. The nurse by the cribs. When I first started at San Gabriel, everything felt colder than I expected. The walls, the lighting, even the air. The neonatal unit was small, lined with metal cribs and humming machines that seemed to breathe with the babies. Nights were long, but I didn't mind. I liked the quiet. My coworkers were kind, but distant. Most of them worked days, so I spent most of my time alone, tidying blankets, checking incubators, writing down vitals. Routine became comfort. I'd walk between rows of sleeping infants and listen to the low, mechanical rhythm of life, a steady reminder of how fragile it all was. Some nights, I'd catch my reflection in the nursery glass and mistake it for someone else. I'd smile at the thought, tired and a little lightheaded from lack of sleep. Back then, I thought that was all it was. Exhaustion, but something in that room always felt watched. By the third week, I started noticing small things out of place. Blankets folded too neatly. Bottles already sterilized. The trash bin emptied before I got there. I thought maybe someone from the previous shift was helping out, though I never saw anyone leave when I arrived. One night, I came in early and saw a figure inside the nursery. A woman in a white uniform, her hair tied in a bun, standing perfectly still by the cribs. She was facing away from me, humming softly. The sound was delicate, almost comforting. I didn't want to interrupt, so I quietly went to the break room. When I came back a few minutes later, the nursery was empty. The hum was gone. I checked the duty roster before starting my rounds. No one had been assigned before me. Every name, every shift accounted for. Still, the next night, when I entered the ward, I felt the faint echo of that same humming, as if she'd just left. I decided to meet her, properly. Whoever she was, she clearly took pride in her work, the way she arranged things, careful and precise. When I walked in that night, she was there again, standing by the second crib from the window. "Good evening," Primera Said softly. "Thank you for helping out." She didn't answer, just kept adjusting the blanket on one of the babies. I stepped closer. Her movements were calm, almost slow motion, like she was underwater. "I'm Clara," I continued. "What's your name?" Nothing. She straightened up and started walking toward the door. Back still turned. The fluorescent lights flickered as she passed. For a second, I thought she'd stop, maybe turn around, but she didn't. She just kept walking until she disappeared down the hall. The room felt colder after that, the kind of cold that settles deep, like a warning. I tried to be casual when I brought it up. During a break, over lukewarm coffee, I mentioned the quiet nurse who sometimes helped me in the nursery. I said it like a joke, like it was nothing. But the reaction was instant. A shared glance between two coworkers, the kind that says too much in silence. Marina, one of the senior nurses, frowned. "What nurse?" "See. Ask it." I laughed it off. Said maybe someone from the evening shift. She shook her head slowly. "No one works in that room before you, Clara. You're the first one in." I wanted to argue, but her tone left no space. The others avoided my eyes. For the rest of the shift, I couldn't stop replaying the look on Marina's face. Not surprise, not disbelief, but recognition, like she already knew who I was talking about. That night, when I walked past the nursery door, the glass reflected my own shape back at me. For a moment, I thought I saw another silhouette behind mine, right by the cribs. I came in earlier than usual, determined to see her again. The corridors were quiet, the kind of silence that rings in your ears. When I entered the nursery, she was there standing exactly where I expected, by the second crib, adjusting a tiny blanket. My throat felt tight, but I managed to speak. "What's your name?" I whispered. She froze. Her hand lingered over the metal rail of the crib. For several seconds, the only sound was the soft beeping from the monitors. Then she turned her head just enough for her voice to carry. "Beatrice." The word hung heavy in the air. My chest tightened. I didn't know why, but that name felt familiar, like something I'd read or heard long ago. I stepped closer, but before I could say anything else, she started walking away. Same slow pace, same silence. Her white uniform faded into the dim corridor, and then she was gone. That night, I barely slept. The name echoed in my mind. A few days later, I went searching for answers. The hospital's hallways twisted like a maze, lined with old bulletin boards no one cared to clean. Near the archives, I found one covered in yellowed papers and faded photographs. Most were from the 60s, smiling doctors, nurses in pressed uniforms, black and white babies swaddled in cloth. And then I saw her. Same posture, same bone of hair, the quiet authority I'd seen night after night. My fingers trembled as I brushed away the dust beneath the photo to read the small print. Beatriz Almeida, Neonatal nurse. 1965. My stomach dropped. I stood there for a long time. Unable tumo. The corridor lights flickered above me, and for a split second, I thought I heard that same soft humming again. Faint, distant, coming from the direction of the nursery. When I turned toward the sound, the hallway was empty. I couldn't let it go. Every night, I returned to the archives during my break, combing through old files that smelled of dust and mold. I found maintenance logs, rosters, payroll records, but nothing about Beatrice after 1965. Then, buried between two folders, I found a brittle newspaper clipping. The headline froze me. Fire in neonatal ward. 1 dead. The article said it happened in 1965. A short circuit, dozens of babies evacuated. One nurse stayed behind, refusing to leave the cribs. Her name was Beatriz Almeida. The photo beside the text showed the same woman I'd seen countless nights. Same posture. Same hairboon. I could barely breathe as I read the last line. Body never recovered. My hands trembled as I folded the clipping. The humming I'd heard for weeks now seemed clearer, closer. It followed me all the way back to the nursery door. That night, I went in early. I didn't care what anyone said. I needed to see her one last time. The nursery was dim, only the incubator lights glowing blue. I called out her name. The air felt heavy, pressing against my chest. The cribs rocked slightly, one after another, as if someone were checking on each baby. The humming started again, faint, trembling, mournful. I whispered, "It's okay. They're safe." Nope. The smell of smoke drifted in faint but real. The temperature dropped. My reflection in the window looked like two shapes, side by side. I took a step back, heart pounding. "Thank you," I whispered, and turned toward the door. Something behind me rattled. Metal against metal. But I didn't turn. I never saw her again after that night, but I knew she was still there. Every time I walked the hallway to clock in, the lights flickered once. Just once. When I passed the nursery, the other nurses said I looked pale, tired, distracted. They didn't know the truth. I handed in my resignation 2 weeks later. Still, sometimes, even years later, I dream of the hospital, of the faint hum of incubators, the soft cry of a newborn, the smell of disinfectant and smoke blending together. And always, at the edge of the dream, I see her standing by the cribs, back turned, calm and quiet, making sure no one is left behind. Even now, when I hear metal rattle in the dark, I still turn, half expecting to see her white uniform, shining under the flickering light. My name is Mariana Costa, and in 2011, I was the head nurse of the neonatal unit at Santa Helena Hospital. I still hear it sometimes, that faint static hum breaking through the intercom, followed by the softest cry you can imagine. It always happened at 3:07 a.m., and no matter how many times I checked, the incubator responsible for that sound was empty. Empty, cold, and unplugged for years. That night, when I finally followed the sound, I learned what silence really hides. My shifts always started the same way, clipboard in hand. Quiet steps echoing down the tiled corridor. The neonatal wing was my domain. A rhythm of blinking monitors, beeping alarms, and the steady hum of oxygen lines. I liked the order of it, the precision. The babies slept beneath the blue glow of the incubators, tiny chests rising and falling with perfect regularity. I checked vitals, adjusted sensors, and signed off every chart. Routine meant safety. Predictability meant control. At night, the ward grew so silent that I could hear my own heartbeat. The hum of the machines filled every corner, a soft, constant presence. It was almost comforting. Almost I didn't know then that the same sound I relied on would soon turn against me. It started as a flicker. The monitors blinked, once, twice, before returning to normal. I barely looked up. Glitches happened all the time, but then the intercom crackled with static, sharp and sudden, followed by a burst of noise that made me flinch. White noise, only a few seconds, but enough to make the hair on my arms rise. The sound faded, replaced by silence so deep it hurt my ears. I called maintenance, reported a possible short circuit. They checked the system, shrugged, said everything was fine. I tried to laugh it off. A power surge? Maybe old wiring. Still, when I walked past the empty cribs, I found myself glancing at the speakers overhead, half expecting the static to return. It didn't. Not that night, but I started noticing the hum differently after that. Like it had changed tone. Breathing faintly beneath the machines. The next night, I was reviewing charts when the clock hit 3:07 a.m. The intercom hissed again, not loud, but steady, like it was building from somewhere deep inside the walls. I froze, and then I heard it. A cry. Soft, faint, unmistakable. A newborn's cry breaking through the static. My body reacted before my mind caught up. I ran to the nursery, checking each crib, all empty. The sound seemed to drift, like it was moving from one corner to another. I followed it to the far end, where a single incubator sat covered in dust, unplugged, labeled for disposal. The cry faded the moment I touched it. Silence returned, heavy and complete. I stood there for a long time, hand on the cold glass, listening, waiting for something I didn't understand to happen again. I remember standing in front of that incubator, the one marked for disposal. Its plastic shell was clouded and yellowed. Dust gathered inside like fog. I shouldn't have leaned closer, but primera did. Beneath the faint hum of the fluorescent lights, there was another sound, soft, rhythmic, like breathing. I touched the glass. Cold. Still. Yet when I pressed my ear against it, I swore I heard something moving inside. I stepped back and forced a nervous laugh. It's just interference, I told myself. But the sound followed me, a low, pulsing static that seemed to fade only when I left the nursery. I told maintenance again. They unplugged everything, checked every wire. Nothing. Later, when I mentioned it to the night doctor, he smiled politely, the kind that hides disbelief. You've been working too much, Mari, he said. You're hearing things. But I wasn't. Because when I passed the intercom that night, I heard the hum again, steady, CALM, and underneath it, a baby's faint hiccup. I couldn't stop thinking about that sound, so on my next day off, I went to the archives in the basement. The smell of old paper and disinfectant mixed in the air. I searched maintenance reports, power logs, anything that could explain what was happening. That's when I found it. A file dated April 3rd, 1999. Neonatal wing power failure. 1 casualty. Male infant. Premature. Cause of death incubator. Malfunction during blackout. Equipment ID 17B04. The same tag on the incubator now locked in storage. The report listed the time of death. 3:07 a.m. I just sat there, staring at that number. My chest tightened. I told myself it couldn't be connected, that ghosts weren't real, that grief sometimes echoes in strange ways. But when I closed the file, I heard it again. Faint, distant, the hiss of static coming through the old speaker above the desk. That night, I brought my phone into the nursery. I set it to record and waited. The clock on the wall ticked so loud it felt alive. Las 3:05, las 3:06. My palms were sweating. Tanit began that whisper of white noise, rising slowly through the intercom. The lights flickered. I held my breath. The sound grew sharper, layered with something else. Soft gasps, like a child trying to breathe. And then, the cry. Thin, wet, desperate. I felt tears sting my eyes. It's not real, I whispered, but my voice trembled. When I replayed the recording later, my stomach dropped. Beneath the static, under the faint cry, there was a whisper. Delicate, almost like a lullaby. He still hasn't slept. I couldn't sleep after hearing that recording. The whisper replayed in my head again and again until I finally gave up and drove back to the hospital before my shift. I went straight to the archives. The room smelled of dust and disinfectant. Rows of patient files stretched endlessly. Boxers stacked on rusted metal shelves. My hands trembled as I searched for records from 1999 when Primera founded infant mortality, March 12th. The name was written in faded blue ink. Rafael Almeida. The attached statement belonged to his mother. She wrote that during the blackout, she heard static through the intercom moments before her baby stopped breathing. I felt my chest tighten. The same sound, the same time. 3:07. I stared at the page until the letters blurred, whispering to myself that it couldn't be the same incubator. But Digdon, I already knew it was. That night, I started hearing the noise before I even entered the nursery. It seeped through the walls, faint but steady, growing louder with each step I took. The lights flickered above me, and the temperature dropped sharply. My breath fogged in front of me. When I reached the old incubator, the static changed, layered with a soft, rhythmic hum. Someone was singing. The melody was fragile, almost maternal, weaving through the noise like a lullaby. My heart pounded as I whispered, "Raphael." The sound stopped. Total silence. Then, behind me, the air shifted a weight on my shoulder, light and deliberate, as if someone was trying to comfort me. I turned quickly, but the room was empty. Only the hum of the machines remained. I decided to end it. I unplugged the entire intercom system before my final shift and waited in the dark nursery. 3:06. My hands were cold, shaking. 3:07. The static returned, faint but persistent, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. It pulsed softly, almost like breathing. Then, so close to my ear I could feel the warmth. A whisper came through the air. "He still hasn't slept." I froze. The incubator rattled once. Metal against tile, and the sound stopped. Absolute silence. The hum of the machines died. The nursery felt heavier, emptier. I knew it was over. A week later, I resigned. But even now, years later, whenever a radio drifts into static, I stop breathing, waiting, listening, wondering if he finally did.